So we have some important news on the current efforts to remove suppressors in short-barreled rifles from the NFA nationwide. Recently, the Hearing Protection Act and the SHORT Act have passed in Congress in H.R. 1, the Big Beautiful Bill. However, that was only a reduction of the tax to $0. But now additional lawsuits have been launched in response to all of that, and they aim to remove the NFA's remaining unconstitutional registry and all those other restrictions. So let's talk about what is happening. Now, before we jump into this video, I want to thank the sponsor of this video, which is Attorneys on Retainer. When it comes to protecting yourself after a self-defense incident, AOR is in a league of their own. For example, AOR recently helped an individual out of the state of New York, and some companies will not cover you in the state of New York, so they got a big win for one of their members in New York. And also recently they announced that they're going to be helping Kayla Giles. Recently you had this Louisiana Supreme Court announced that they're going to be reversing some of the case there and sending it back down to the lower courts for a new, a trial, a new consideration of the case. So that is significant, and AOR is going to be helping her as well. So you can check them out using the link down below in the detail section, also in the pinned comment. I will also leave a link to some of their videos that you can watch and kind of understand the coverage and what they're doing also for Kayla Giles. And if you sign up using my link and use my code ARMEDSCHOLAR, you can get $50 off of your individual sign up plan or $25 off of a family plan for a limited time. So as I mentioned in the intro, in this video, we're going to be talking about what is currently happening right now in response to the Hearing Protection Act and the SHORT Act getting passed in the H.R. 1 Big Beautiful Bill. Now, if you've been watching this channel for a while, you will know that we've been covering H.R. 1 and that it was passed, and also the versions of the HPA and the SHORT Act that were included in that bill were simply the reduction of the NFA tax. Now, under the new law, the NFA tax has been reduced for short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns, AOWs, and suppressors from $200 to $0. Now, in my eyes, that was a half measure. And of course, I wanted the full repeal of all of those NFA restrictions, but unfortunately, rhinos in Congress were unwilling to press this issue to get the full version that we wanted included in the Big Beautiful Bill. And there was also, no real effort made to remove the Senate parliamentarian that overrode the full versions of the bills that we wanted included in this, effort to get the full NFA removed. However, this fight is still far from over. In response to the $0 tax language that was added in and was just passed into law, now there's already been some lawsuits that have been filed to remove the rest of the NFA's unconstitutional restrictions on SBRs, SBSs, and suppressors. GOA, FRAC, Palmetto State Armory, and Silencer Co. have now already filed a lawsuit against the ATF. Now, in this lawsuit filed by GOA and the coalition of all those other groups, they argue that enacted in 1934, the National Firearms Act, the NFA, is premised on Congress's taxing powers. The act imposed a $200 tax, approximately $5,000 in today's dollars, on the manufacture and transfer of particular classes of firearms. The NFA's authors left no doubt that the NFA was an exercise of the taxing power, and that the Supreme Court upheld it on that basis. This has been the uncontroversial understanding of courts and commenters for nearly a century. But the NFA no longer imposes any tax on the vast majority of firearms it purports to regulate. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which Congress and the President enacted on July 4th, 2025, zeroes the manufacture and transfer tax on nearly all NFA-regulated firearms. That means that the constitutional foundation on which the NFA rests was dissolved, and the NFA cannot be upheld under any other Article 1 power. With respect to the untaxed firearms, the act is now unconstitutional. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act, they go on to state, left undisturbed the NFA's registration requirements and restrictions on the manufacture and transfer, which for most NFA firearms now lack any accompanying exercise of Congress's taxing powers. Plaintiffs are individuals and organizations who are burdened by the NFA's regulatory requirements pertaining to untaxed firearms. Plaintiffs seek an order declaring that the NFA is unconstitutional with respect to the untaxed firearms it purports to now regulate, and enjoining enforcement of the unconstitutional provisions. In summary, what GOA and the other plaintiffs are asking for in this challenge is for the court to declare that the NFA's remaining registration and other restrictions and the transfer requirements pertaining to these now untaxed firearms, that those exceed Congress's enumerated powers. Since the tax is removed, there is no basis for this to be constitutional, and that it should be found invalid. They also asked for the court to enjoin all the ATF's employees and agents from now implementing and enforcing the NFA against all of these untaxed firearms. So that is what the new lawsuit aims to do in response to the NFA tax change that was passed in the Big Beautiful Bill. This lawsuit was filed in a Northern District of Texas court, which is a federal court. The 2A cause has been doing pretty well in the Northern District of Texas and, in the Texas federal courts, and it's been doing fairly well also in the Fifth Circuit, which sits above these, federal courts here. And we've got a lot of wins in cases like the Vanderstock 80%er case, the mock pistol brace challenge, and a lot of other ones like the FRT cases. And now we're just going to, wait to see how this develops. But we did get news and a notice on the docket that this case has now been assigned to Judge James Hendricks, who is a Trump appointee. Now, when it comes to Judge Hendricks, who's going to be reviewing this NFA case, he's made some decisions that, of course, the left has hated. He's a Trump appointee, and it seems that, he is, in line kind of with the ideology as far as what we believe, but, he hasn't had a lot of opportunities, I believe, to address any 2A cases. Recently, he had a case in front of him called the AARP versus Trump challenge, and that was a case that he reviewed, and eventually that case made its way all the way up to the Supreme Court. Now, in that case, Judge Hendricks was asked to grant an emergency TRO for Venezuelan individuals who are alleged gang members who are under some removal orders. When this case made its way to the Supreme Court, Judge Hendricks took some heat from the majority of the court for allegedly failing to take the emergency TRO request of these individuals serious enough, since he didn't respond to that emergency TRO for about 14 hours. However, in that 7-2 Supreme Court decision, you had justices like Thomas and Alito dissent in favor of what Judge Hendricks did, since they pointed out that he set a short time frame for the Trump administration to respond to that emergency TRO, and he, did take it serious, but he put a more limited time period and wanted some responses. And the dissenting justices there, Thomas and Alito, kind of pointed out that the majority of justices were kind of mischaracterizing how this actually played out, and so they were in favor of what Judge Hendricks did. So that's the judge who is handling this high-profile case. He's familiar with high-profile and controversial cases. He was appointed by Trump, but we don't have any firm 2A cases that he's reviewed to kind of gather maybe how he would handle this. So we're going to have to watch this closely to see how this develops. However, I will note, in my opinion, regardless of what happens, this no doubt will be elevated eventually to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. And the possibility of a nationwide injunction is kind of now off the table because the Supreme Court recently issued a 6-3 ruling that, they do not agree with nationwide injunctions, and they kind of ban those in certain situations, other than, when they're in favor of it or when it, benefits a certain side. But generally, they are not in favor of these interlocutory nationwide preliminary injunctions. That means that any relief would likely be limited to just the organization and their members. But even with that, there is a likelihood that the Fifth Circuit would stay those decisions, pending their review. So any win that we got in the lower court would probably be stayed, and they would want to maintain the status quo of the NFA and the registry until further review actually happened at a higher level. Now, that's just my opinion based on what we've seen happen recently and, what we've seen develop in types of cases like these ones. One caveat to all of this is that we do not know actually how the Trump ATF will respond to this challenge because they're the defendants, and so we're going to have to see how they respond. We've known that recently the Trump administration has been a little bit more aggressive when it comes to the 2A cause. We've had the Trump DOJ, Pam Bondi, and the 2A task force change their stance in a lot of 2A cases in favor of the Second Amendment. We've seen that happen kind of in the suppressor challenges and some other challenges as well. So we're going to have to wait to see how they actually respond to this complaint and what they argue in favor of the NFA, and specifically what do they argue in favor of the current registry as it stands, even though there is a $0 tax. So that's what we're going to be currently watching for, is to see how the Trump ATF responds to this. What are they going to say now after the HPA and the Short Act and the reduction of the tax, and how maybe do they try to defend the registry, or do they not even try to defend it? So that's what's currently going on in response to the Hearing Protection Act and the Short Act. As we get more information, I will let you guys know. If you want to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that, of course, is to subscribe to the channel. Also, you can check out my website, armscholar.com, where we have a lot of resources over there. You can get the free legal guide that we have. All you have to do is give your email, and you get the free PDF, and then we do some follow-up emails to give you additional information. You can check out the deals that we have over there, and then also all the channel merch, like t-shirts that we have available for you guys as well. But as always, thank you guys for all of your support. Thank you for watching. And never forget, this nation was built by Armed Scholars, and this nation will be maintained by Armed Scholars.